Welcome to Real Talk in ELT, a podcast that talks about the reality of teaching English.
Yeah, I think, well, it's just the construction in the background is just going to go, so we're just going to have to do it, but I'll keep muting myself. And it seems to be quieted down. So we can start, and that way we can at least get into it.
Cool, let's do it.
Yeah. Are you ready, though? Is everything all set?
I am. I have everything I need here. I have Mr. Trunk, by the way.
Oh, good. Okay, yes, he's always welcome.
And I have a brain, and I have a couple of books. So yeah, I have my coffee. Let's do it.
Good to go. All right. All right, so welcome back to another episode of Real Talk in ELT. I'm here again with my friend André. I'm very excited to have you.
Well, thank you very much. Honored to be here.
Of course. Let me introduce you formally for those of you who don't know André, though he has been on the podcast before. André Hedlund is a Chevening alumnus. I interviewed one of your brethren, we can say.
Oh, yeah.
Priscilla.
Oh, Priscilla, yeah.
We talked about ELF. Yeah.
That's why, actually, I got the scholarship because of Priscilla, because she was the one who did the session many years ago, and I had no idea about the scholarship. And then I went to her session, and then I said, you know what, I'm going to try. And I applied, and I got the scholarship. So, yeah.
Teachers helping teachers, see?
Thank you, Priscilla. It was amazing.
Yay!
Yeah.
Okay, so anyways, you are a Chevening alumnus. You have a master's in psychology of education from the University of Bristol. You're an educational consultant, speaker, and guest lecturer on bilingualism and cognition. André is also a board member of Brastiesel's Mind, Brain, and Education SIG. The nerds of the group, but very important nerds. We need you all.
You're all geeks,
And the academic director of EduFest, and this is why we're here today a little bit. He's the author of The Owl Factor. Do you have your mug?
Yeah, it's here.
Oh, we got the book. Okay.
Anybody wants it?
The Owl Factor. Yeah. Reframing your teaching philosophy, and he blogs at edcrocks.com because sometimes we always forget the C. So edcrocks.com. Welcome back, sir.
Thank you very much. I think I said that, and I'm going to tell you again. It's weird when people read your bio, It feels like, okay. Yeah. But yeah, it's okay.
Slightly uncomfortable. It's fine.
It's a little awkward, but I like it in a way, in a strange way. Yeah.
Yeah, we have to, make sure people know who you are. So
a certain place, like, okay, somebody's reading my bio. That makes me a little bit more important, I guess. Yeah.
Oh goodness. Well, I was interviewing your buddy there, Rudy. He said he felt so famous when I was reading his bio.
We're synchronized,
You guys are on many things. It's odd. Anyways, so the reason that you're here is because we had been talking. Well, we've been going back and forth about some other things. EduFest is coming up, and it's been having this series of talks, which have been really great.
And you are going to deliver a great webinar very soon, right?
I am. I'm excited about that in a couple of weeks. And then. Also, the Macmillan event is just around the corner, right? The global, I always forget the name of the appropriate name. It's a Global Teachers Festival.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a festival.
That's it, yeah.
And you are delivering a plenary for them, which is very exciting.
I mean, this is a huge honor, I think, because, it's the very first plenary. So I'm basically opening the event, it's going to be great. Yeah.
What a way to kick it off. I have to say that I'm very excited for you, very proud to be your friend in this.
Well, thank you.
So the topic or the title of your plenary is Past and Future of Teaching, a Science of Learning Perspective.
Yes.
And we had just been chatting that this is it's still evolving through conversations and social interactions. So how did this start and where is it going? I guess we can talk specifically about the talk first, and then we'll try to structure I know we had some talking points. We'll try and structure ourselves so it makes sense.
Well, let's evolve together, right?
Yeah.
That's the whole point. Yeah. But yeah, this is actually a huge coincidence because I was in the UK, a couple of years ago for my master's, and then I remember going to a lot of conferences in Europe because it was very easy, it's just very cheap. I could go by train or plane. And I ended up meeting a lot of people who are somehow involved with the big publishers. And one of the guys I met, a very nice guy, Will Rickson, and he works for Macmillan, and he attended my session. And I'm trying to remember where, but I think it was in Barcelona. So there's a huge conference in Barcelona. It's called Innovate ELT. It's a great conference, really innovative. It's very, very creative, actually. And I think he was there, and I asked him to record a quick video because I was working on a project. And, I talked about the mind brain education science, and then he invited me to do this. And then I think he knows me. So he remembers me as somebody who talks about science and how we learn. And then I got an email a couple of months ago, and then he said that he was actually organizing this huge event for Macmillan Global Teachers Festival. I've been a fan for a very long time.
I was going to say, I've attended it. It's fantastic.
It's
right? Online. It's super dynamic. It's really easy. They offer the sessions at multiple times. If anybody hasn't attended, should attend. It's really great.
Great. And a lot of people, like amazing people, the lineup is really impressive. I'm actually, I'm speaking at a conference where I get to share with Paul Kirshner, who, by the way, is a big reference in the science of learning and teaching, and he's published a couple of books. And then that's how it started. Basically, Will reached out to me, and then he sent me an email and asked if I wanted to open the conference because he thought that I had something to offer. And then I said, oh, this is a huge problem. I mean, I'm opening this amazing event, and I have to talk about something that will interest people, something that is, I don't know, something that nobody has ever talked about, or something very different. And that was
there is a lot of professional pressure, right? Because it's kind of like, gosh, okay. Next
but
level.
He said, that at least he gave me something. He said, but we chose you because we want you to talk about the science of learning, because that's what you do.
Yeah, but that's really cool because it's like, it's kind of, next step, next phase, like doing something really big, like a huge plenary like this. It's fun, but then it also brings you way out of your comfort zone. And I think that sometimes when we're like giving the same presentations or trainings, in the same settings or similar settings, we don't really push ourselves to get outside, like to expand and
we don't evolve, right?
Yeah. Yes. Okay.
And one of the things that I've learned throughout my whole evolutionary process, let's say, is that every time I say yes to something that I don't know interests me, but in a challenging way, like, okay, this is great, but oh my gosh, I have to prepare. I learned something very useful. That nowadays my courses, a lot of courses I offer, are based on those things. Somebody invited me to do a talk, and then it was not exactly something that I had ready, so I had to really prepare and study. And I learned so much in the process. And I think this is really part of evolving. So just like you said, leaving your comfort zone and trying to do something that is a little different, that challenges you, that somehow pulls you toward, something bigger. So that's how I said yes, basically. I mean, how could I say no, right?
Right. And I think that also kind of is universal. For me, at least, when I'm forced to do something, when I'm challenged to kind of go outside comfort zones, I think universally speaking, that's people do tend to learn. You live and you learn, right? So that kind of brings us to the first moment of how we wanted to put this talk of what has always worked.
So that's the thing, right? I think we kind of oversimplify things when we talk about learning, but there are universal principles that without them, there's no learning. So we know what has always worked in that sense, because, for example, if there's no attention and memory, you don't learn. So this is, basic neuroanatomy. So the physiology of your brain, so you have the working memory in your frontal lobe, and you also have your attention networks. And if those things are not activated, you don't learn. So what has always worked, and this is really simple, of course, we can develop a little more, has to do with grabbing people's attention. So really, if there is no attention, you won't make new memories. If you don't make new memories, you haven't really learned anything. And there was a time back in the day when we didn't have all this knowledge, that everything really grabbed our attention because it was novel, right? We didn't know much about the world. So if you go back tens of thousands of years ago, and think about people exploring the environment, and how intrigued they must have been, when they saw something different, and that grabs your attention. If it grabs your attention and you analyze and you really engage with it, chances are you're going to make strong memories. It's going to be a memorable event, and then you're going to learn for good, let's say, or for a long time. You can unlearn stuff as well, so we know that. The problem today is that nothing is really that novel anymore, right? Because we figured out everything, so it's really hard to keep.
I mean, we haven't figured out everything.
Well, I mean, we haven't figured out everything, but there's so much information about everything.
Right. It's like
And it's
overstimulus almost. To the if
Exactly.
it overstimulus to the point where it's not novel and it doesn't get our attention because there's just so much.
Exactly.
We're like stimulated
It's
all the time.
overloading,
Yeah.
our working memories. And you mentioned that. So especially kids and teenagers, they are overstimulated all the time. And because it's so easy to access anything else, you have to do this, but you can access through your phone, social media, right? So you don't even allow yourself to get bored anymore. So when you start getting bored, then you just do something else to get a dopamine shot, because you want to feel good, right? And that's the problem. So actually there are a couple of studies showing today, and of course we still need more studies to say, hey, this is really happening. But today we have a very weird scenario that for the first time after many generations, our IQ is actually declining.
I saw this. We're getting dumber.
Yeah, we're getting dumber. And
What? How is that even possible?
But yeah, that's the thing. Every new generation has certain things that will make their lives easier, and their access to knowledge easier, right? So it should be logical, if you think about it, that each new generation will actually increase their IQ because they have more possibilities, more opportunities to learn, better education, and so forth, right? But the thing is, we have reached the turning point, apparently, because nowadays we have just too much of everything. It's very hard for you to focus on things, and there's just actually there are even alternate realities, so fake news, for example. So it's very hard for you to make sure that you are using reliable sources, and that means that attention and memory, which are very I would say scarce cognitive resources, they are in this era where there's so much going on. It's even worse, it's even more difficult for you to pay attention and to focus on the things you should, because it's too much out there, right? Yeah.
Well, like historically speaking, because I know that you kind of want to we always go back to the Greeks with you, always.
Oh yeah, my book is about the Greeks. That's why the owl, the temple, right?
Yeah. So historically speaking, and I think
Yeah.
I mean, when we're talking about the Greeks and going back to you said even the Middle Ages, Industrial Revolution, when we were kind of brainstorming here,
Yep.
I think there was just, like you said, there was less, and
Exactly.
I think, well, there's a couple things that because there was less, it was easy to focus on things, and
Definitely.
and
Yeah.
society also had an influence of that, right? Because when we were learning, society determined these were the values and principles of like a huge number. And now we're kind of divided, where values and principles of what is important to learn
That's
is
true,
up for
yeah.
debate.
Yeah. And that means we are not moving forward in terms of content and curriculum, and because we're going back to what should be the standards, right? Or some, but to be honest, if you go back to ancient Greece, um, a lot of people were not allowed to have an education, like women, for example, slaves. And so basically men could have an education. And the education that they had a lot to do with contemplating the universe. And, actually most of the subject areas that we studied in high school, or even before high school, elementary school, they come from Greece. They have their origins in Greece. Like math comes from mathematics, which is a Greek word, mathematiken, right? And that means fond of learning. History comes from historia, and that means investigation or research, also a Greek word. And there's so many, like biology, bios and logos, right? So basically it's the study or the speech of life, right? Uh, so basically, all of the things that we studied at school, they were born in ancient Greece somehow, and that tells us something about what they were doing, 3,000 years ago. But like you said, um, they were really trying to figure out how the universe works. They were asking very interesting questions. I like very much the history of ancient Greece, because it has something to do with Socrates and Western philosophy, critical thinking, asking questions, figuring out things, recording those things, writing about those things, because that was basically the only way they could record things back in the day, right? And nowadays it's, there's so much recorded, and not just in writings. We have videos, we have, podcasts, right? We have everything, and it's overwhelming. And because it's overwhelming, and because we have new debates on, what the curriculum should look like, it's really hard to know what to focus on. And I feel like things are not moving. It's important to have those debates, I'm telling you, definitely. But I feel like we need to first thing that we have to do is we have to structure elementary education, like, to give our students the means to understand things, and be able to tell the difference between a reliable source and fake news, for example, where to find information, but not just in a very open, minimal guidance type of thing, because we need to have certain, I'd say, pillars of general knowledge, so that we can apply those things. It's like playing tennis or whatever sport you want. You need to know the basics before you can move on to something more complex, right?
Right. And I think that the evolution, I'm not saying that it's bad. And I joked that, we are
Yeah.
getting dumber, but scientifically speaking, we are.
Well, yeah, in a
But
way. Yeah.
but like if we look at it nowadays and we say, okay, fine,
Yeah.
we have overabundance of information and we're not really critically looking at it, but there has to be a general consensus on, okay, so what do we want? Like you said, elementary, starting from elementary, hopefully we can get up there. Let's organize it a little bit. What do we want? And then, because we have an overabundance, we really need to focus on those higher level, like higher order thinking skills and applications of things like Bloom's taxonomy, things like that, which have evolved over a period of time, but those are skills that we now need to teach. So maybe we're not necessarily focused on how does this work, like the ancient Greeks were looking at, but they looked at things quite deeply, not superficially.
Exactly.
And we have a lot of like the deep and superficial knowledge, but we have to then now say, okay, how can we reorder these things and say, what is really good practices in education?
So, you touched on something that is really interesting, like Bloom's taxonomy, for example. We know nowadays that, based on the science of learning, it's not really a hierarchy. It's more like a loop,
Right.
So, like,
well, because it has developed, they have changed it, right? They have
they have changed
they've
it,
changed the
exactly.
way it looks too.
Yeah, like remembering something is not necessarily low order or easier than, let's say, analyzing something. It depends on what you're doing, the complexity of things. If you have to remember something very complex, for example, that's harder than creating something very simple. And even though, creating is at the top of the pyramid, right? But I feel like going back to Greece, and especially Socrates and his followers, like Plato, for example. There was a lot of critical thinking going on there, because that's how Socrates taught his disciples. He would ask questions and walk the streets of Athens, and I feel like this nowadays it doesn't happen as often, as because again we have to memorize a lot of things today, because there's so much knowledge out there, right? And we have to learn the
But do
basics.
we
And
really have to memorize, Andre? Sorry to interrupt, but do we really have to memorize? Some
yeah, so
things we
yeah,
do, but
we do. Yeah,
memorization is
yeah,
key, right? But
yeah,
sometimes I think we're putting overemphasis on memorization because we have all these tools that are facilitating. So we want to, right? So we have to find where's the balance. Memorization is important, but to what
definitely.
extent?
Yeah. Well, like, think about English classes, if you want to have even a basic conversation, you have to memorize a lot of words so that you can build sentences and have a conversation with someone. But of course, if you are in a context where you don't need to know certain words because they're very, I don't know, technical, or you're not going to use them very often, you can always check them on Wikipedia or a dictionary or whatever. But still, we do have to memorize the foundation of
Yeah.
vocabulary, let's say, like the basic stuff. The same thing for sports, like I was saying, if you're
Mm.
going to play soccer or tennis, you have to know the basic movements, like otherwise, and then you cannot make progress if you haven't memorized those things, because again, memory leads to learning. Memory is a cognitive process, that when you put that together with attention, because with no attention there's no memory, then that leads to learning. The thing is, and this is I think the problematic, the challenge today, it's like everybody's going back to Montessori, for example, who was an amazing educator. And she said that we don't need teachers to be there with kids all the time, just follow what they do, allow them to explore, and that's really great. But there is a point, again, that those kids, they have to memorize key stuff, basic principles of everything that they're going to do, and they can learn those things throughout their time, let's say, in the Montessorian school, yes. But I feel like we have come to a point nowadays that we think that everything we do that is sort closer to behaviorism, like drilling, and is bad. And now we just want to have active learning methods, and we have to find the balance, actually.
Yeah,
That,
that's what you
yeah,
said it in a more a
yeah,
clearer, nicer way, but that's what I was trying to get at. We need to
yeah,
have some, but then we have to kind of find the limits. Okay, so memorization is necessary. To what extent? Active learning is necessary, but to what extent? Because how far can active learning go if you're isolated and on your own? You can explore only to the limits within your own mind, right? And then you're going to
exactly.
reach a limit. Everybody does. And
Yeah,
then it
and
either is going to take some guidance or some socialization, like we were talking about.
there
It's
you
going to
go.
take something else to move you beyond that point.
Yeah. And you mentioned something else, what's something that has always worked and will probably always work, because that's how the brain learns, is social interaction. We learn from other people, and this is very true, especially true for kids. And we have lots of evidence from the research that, science of learning, neuroeducation, showing that kids, very, very young learners, or babies, they don't really learn very well from machines, from computer screens, and they have to have someone there, physically there, so they can look at that person and learn. Even pronunciation, for example, so phonology. So there's very interesting research showing that if you, even if it's live but it's on a screen, they don't pay attention as much as if a person is right there next to them, and they will pick up those sounds that people are using around them, and they can keep those sounds in their brains for the rest of their lives. And then they might sound more like this or that, whereas kids that only have their immediate family, let's say, right there next to them, very soon, actually after 12 months or so, they will stop hearing certain sounds because nobody uses those sounds, even though we have many sounds in all human languages, right? So one thing we can do to help kids always learn different sounds, and maybe that's going to be much easier for them when it comes to learning another language, right? Because they have those sounds, is get people from other countries and invite them to be around your kids and use their language so that they can, oh, this is something that I should pay attention to. It doesn't happen when you're looking at a screen when you're a kid. And we know now so there's a huge debate now. It's like the future of teaching, but we can talk about that later. But are we going to learn from machines in the future? Are we going, like, nowadays we are teaching remotely most of the time. How effective is that if we know that the brain is the social organ? So if we have a social connection here because we are grown-ups and we know that it kind of feels almost like we're there together. But for kids, it's very different. And even for us, we don't know if it's really the same because it's something very recent. And we have to study how the brain learns. And there are studies showing, for example, Zoom fatigue, and it's very hard for you to focus. So it's actually overwhelming for you to be in this context here with no physical contact. And, so it probably means we are not learning as well as we could if we were physically there.
It would be interesting to see, especially the pandemic babies,
Yes.
the children that were born or were very, very young during the pandemic and then were
Yep.
isolated. What are going to be some of the consequences of that? Because if learning is social, right? And so they were isolated for a few years, a critical period in their development. And so what does that translate into?
Yeah, this is, I think it's really troublesome in many regards because we don't know exactly how this is going to affect kids, but we know that the first couple of years of a kid's life, they're very important in terms of laying the foundation, the neural foundation for learning. So basically, they're going through a very exuberant period of synaptogenesis. So they're creating lots of synapses, connections between their neurons, and those connections are very important for you to create new neural pathways or networks. And networks are responsible for basically everything we learn. So if you need to retrieve something, you need to access a neural network. And if you haven't done it properly because you were not in the presence of anyone, let's say, because you had to be isolated and you were at home and receiving your education remotely through a screen. So of course, we expect to see some consequences, very negative consequences in the future for those kids. And I feel like, again, there's a whole debate because we're talking about the evolution of learning and teaching, and the debate that started possibly almost 20 years ago, actually, is that we should be teaching people more remotely. We should be integrating more technology, or especially communication technology, like a video conferencing tool, whatever, for kids and teenagers all over the world to have more access to things. But how effective is that if we, again, take into consideration that the social organ really wants to be around real people physically? And that's going to, I think this is probably going to be the most important debate in the next couple of years, because
Yeah, I mean it's interesting because well, I teach mostly adults. I have some teenagers, but vast majority are adults. And what happens is they can recognize that this is kind of a different type of environment. But what happens is usually through lessons and trainings and things that I give them, then those things, adults can see it as this is something that I then need to apply. So then they take those things and they apply them in social scenarios, whether it's in business or personal lives. And that's something that sometimes kids don't do, young children and adolescents, because they see the learning, right? So they start taking classes online and it's like, lesson, done and dusted, walk
Yeah.
away. I'm not going to, right.
I
So
didn't need to do anything else,
yeah,
right?
I don't apply. Like
Yeah.
I sat there, I did my lesson, and that's maybe where it's kind of like we can take
Yeah.
intervention measures or preventative
Yeah.
measures to not have that
You
problem.
know, you talked about it, I talked about it. It's self-efficacy, basically. It's, it's knowing it's self-sufficiency. It's knowing that whatever I learn here is going to disappear if I don't revisit, if I don't reinforce it and consolidate it into my long-term memory, right? So adults, they are aware of that because we are usually more metacognitive in a way, because we, first of all, we can control our impulses better. Our brains are fully mature. Yeah, it depends on the situation, but
So I mean, it depends on who we're talking
I
to,
mean, we're
but yeah,
talking about
okay.
evolution. Their brains are evolving still, right?
Right.
And then the prefrontal cortex is not ready until you are 25, 26, 27 years old. But anyway, that means that you, as if you are a responsible adult, you are more self-efficacious, and you know that whatever I'm doing here, I have to apply somewhere, otherwise I will not learn very effectively. And I think one of the things we've learned throughout evolution, again, and especially of institutional schooling, right, education context and all of that, is that kids, they learn differently and they need certain things that adults don't need, and then vice versa, of course. I think there was a notion, and this comes from John Locke, a very famous British author, who wrote about the tabula rasa. Basically, the kids as blank slates, and then they are born into this world with basically nothing in their brains, and then that means that we have to put everything inside their brains, which is not true, because we have genetic memory, and we are born with certain notions of how things work in the universe, and even a notion of quantity, like amounts and all of those things. We are born with that, basic principles of physics and biology. We don't need to learn those things. It's part of evolution. But we do have to learn about our social history and the things that we have created throughout, I don't know, many thousands of years. And we know that now. So that means that we can better tailor, let's say, educational contexts, so that kids can learn more effectively. But the problem is we are overloading their brains nonetheless. I think, even though we know certain things, it's very hard to change that. It's very fixed. What we do in education is very fixed. We've been doing it for a very long time, especially since the Industrial Revolution. So it's really about, like you said, there's too much memorization, but not so much, output or in application in creative ways, I would
Well,
say.
I mean, I think it kind of goes to, and again, I try not to criticize the educational system. You and I are a product of it. So, and
Yeah.
we have many
And we
amazing,
made it.
we made it, and we have
Sure.
many amazing
Yeah.
colleagues that have gone through it as well and are contributing to this. So the
Yeah.
educational system, it might be a little broken or,
Yeah.
sluggish. It's kind of like a dinosaur. However, at the same
Yeah.
time, it is still producing people that are able to do some things.
Definitely. Yeah.
The problem is that, like you mentioned, after the Industrial Revolution, and you can probably speak more to it about it if you would like, we saw individuals as workers. And
Yeah.
and then we had, of course, we had the invention of electricity, and these kind of like, we're working during nighttime hours. We're going against our nature, against our biology, to be highly productive. Again,
Exactly.
not necessarily a bad thing, because look at all the advancements we've made in modern medicine and travel and everything else. Okay. But still, at the same time, we're working against our biology. And I think sometimes in education, we work against learning, because we say, well, you need to go from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5, and then you graduate, and then you have to take this test and you have to pass this. And it's like, okay, but is that really measuring? And I know that we can't measure learning, because I learned that from you. We can't.
Yeah, it's hard,
It's
but
hot,
yeah,
right? We can
it's
only
complex.
measure production, like what people are
Yeah.
able to produce.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think we've standardized it to a point that we're
Yeah.
starting to, again, work against the learning, similar to what we're
Yeah.
doing now, where we're working against nature.
Yeah, I feel that there are three, like you mentioned a couple of things that have everything to do with my talk, and for example, for a very long time we educated for survival, and it was really through observation, like you learn from your parents, and very much like animals do, it just, of course, they have limited cognition, but and
It's
a lot of
like,
it,
don't die.
yeah, don't die,
Don't
exactly.
die.
If you eat this, or if you go there, you're going to die. So don't do it.
Don't die,
And
reproduce, and
because
then
there
maybe
were,
die after.
yeah, exactly. And there were linguistic limitations many, let's say 1 million years ago, or many hundreds of thousands of years ago. Even though we could always, animals can communicate, and if we think about it, we've been able to communicate for a very long time, but nowadays we can communicate much more clearly, right? So of course, basically we learned for survival and by observing our parents and the tribe, the community. So that was the first thing. And then of course, so you jump to the Middle Ages, especially actually the contemporary age, the Industrial Revolution. So it's really learning. Oh, actually, a little before the Industrial Revolution, let's say the Middle Ages. It's learning to be obedient, because of the government, the kingdom, the king, the empire, the
Be a good
religion.
citizen in service to the greater good,
Exactly.
right? That was the
Exactly.
message. You have to do this because this
Yeah.
is your social class, and this is
Exactly.
what you contribute to
And
our
there's no
society.
ascension.
Hmm.
Basically, if you were born a peasant, you die a peasant, right? And again, you have to accept certain things. So there wasn't really education in that sense, because many people didn't know how to read or write. They didn't have access to anything. So again, it was really just education for you to conform to the status quo, let's say. But then when Industrial Revolution came, the Industrial Revolution, that we know happened in the 18th century, and it was really about the market and industry and production, right? So we're educating people to be productive, and we don't care about their biological needs very much. We'll just put them in the factory for as many hours as possible. If they die, we'll just get another. There's so many people out there, and again, they had to learn how to operate machines, and so they had to know certain basic things, like reading the signs. They had to know how to add and subtract and all of that. But again, it was for the market. And now the revolution that has come quite recently is really about, it's educating people for life. So it goes back to John Dewey in a way, or Paulo Freire, or Montessori. It's really, education is life, right? And you it's not just being productive or surviving or accepting the government and religion. It's really about being happy and finding out what makes sense to you, right? Who you are in life, and knowing that we have certain physiological needs, and that we have certain cognitive stages, and we need to respect that. But it's also preparing people for the marketplace, basically. So we're trying to give people certain skills and competencies that will help them to be more competitive, let's say. So okay, so that's the huge dichotomy, I'd say. You need
Yeah,
to be
it's
happy,
like
but
you're
you need to be like,
here.
yeah,
So learn how to exist in this current reality, but
yeah,
also, because we're living in this current reality, you have certain demands in terms of becoming a type of citizen that contributes to the forward progress of what we've already developed, because we don't
yeah,
want to regress back, but at the same time,
exactly.
try to be happy, but also
Like being idle, for example, is no good, right? Because you need to
right.
produce things, and but still there's so much pressure, and we have to, there is no end if you think about specializing and professional development, right? When you're not doing, I don't know, a course, or you feel like you're useless, because you're not keeping up with the times, and this is also problematic. So we have to unlearn this mindset, I think, and we have to look at people as human beings with certain psychological, physiological needs, and but still, that's how education has evolved. Nowadays, it's trying to fool you into buying that you need to be productive all the time and you have to market all of your skills. So if you learn something, sell it. Why not just learn it because it's nice, it makes you feel good, you get better at it? Like, I play the guitar. Do I have to play at a pub, or can I just do it because I like it, right? So I think there's this mindset
There's
that everything that
definitely
we learn,
yeah,
we
this
have to
this
sell,
like
you
we
know?
have to be productive, we have to produce
Yeah.
something, we have to do something. I was actually working with a teacher recently, and mentoring and just trying to figure out where the career objectives and goals and things like
Yeah.
that. And I mean, it translates from all, and it's instilled during the educational process. And she's like, well, I don't know really what I'm doing. And I was like, well, what do you want to do? Like,
Right.
what's the main objective here? And she's like, well, I'm thinking that in the future long-term goal, I'd like to be a teacher trainer. I was like, okay, great. So
Yeah.
what are some of the steps that would help you to become that person? Like, first of all, what are the criteria of this person? And this requires lots of reflection, lots of
Perfect.
idle time of sitting and
Yeah.
just thinking. And I
Because
told,
you can't think if you don't have space to
yes.
think and time to think.
Right. So she was like, "Well, I have to make a list." I'm like, "No, no, 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 no." So the way that my process works, I give them
Yeah.
assignments, like homework to do. This is what we're going to
Great.
do. And
Yeah.
her homework was like, for 1 week, you produce nothing when it
Yeah.
comes to your career plan.
I love it.
All I want you to do is sit
I
there
think I
and
will do the same, Kelly. Thank you for the advice. I will stop for a whole week.
just stop for a week and
Yeah.
think about it and I
Yeah.
told her, let your imagination run wild. Think of
Yeah.
all the possibilities,
Yeah.
search around, get some extra information, but don't be productive. Let's put quote
Yeah.
unquote productive in any
Yeah.
way of making a list or da da da. Don't do that.
Yeah.
Just reflect on it.
Wonderful.
And
Yeah.
like,
And
we
that's
don't
what
have
we
time
were.
to do that.
Yeah, we were able to do that many hundreds and thousands of years ago, right? Because there was no institutionalized schooling for most people, right? But they didn't have the tools. So on the other hand, like language and cognition and knowledge of many things, so they didn't have the tools to come up with great things. But some people did actually. Some people invented amazing things because they had a lot of time to think and go over and reflect. And I feel like a lot of people look at the greatest discoveries and inventions of our time as something that happened overnight. Like it's a very long
Oh
process. And I feel
God,
like
no.
that's the thing with school today that needs to change in a way. We need to give people some time to figure out not only what makes them happy, who they are, but actually to come up with interesting things that could potentially solve the problems we have today. But since we have to memorize so many things all the time, cognitive overload, and then you don't really have enough time to do anything else, right? We
It's
have to cover the
literally
content. Yeah.
right. It's literally connecting the dots. And in a scientific perspective, I mean, you can
Yeah.
speak to that, please. Connecting the dots is actually making like just giving your brain
Exactly.
time.
Yeah, exactly. Because and we know that from research that when you are using your working memory, because you're learning something, or you're exposed to something new, and you have to remember those things, you don't have a lot of space to do anything very creative normally. So what I think it was Barbara Oakley who mentions that. She has a book about maths and how you learn, and she talks about the focused and the diffuse modes of thinking. So basically, when we have our working memory filled with lots of information, then we cannot make deeper connections because everything is basically concentrated inside your prefrontal cortex, your frontal lobe, because that's where your working memory system is. But when you relax and you stop thinking about that, you go into the diffuse mode, and that means that those things, they start consolidating and they start reaching deeper connections and looking for, because everything that you have stored in your brain is all over the brain. It's not just concentrated here in the frontal area of your brain. So that I think Salvador Dali, who was a Spanish painter, he said that basically when he got stuck and he was painting a canvas and he felt like, I don't know what to do next, I need a break. He would take a break, and he had a keychain or something, and he would go to his favorite armchair and take a nap. And then so as soon as he took the nap, right, he fell asleep. He would drop the key, and the sound of the key hitting the ground would wake him up. And that was enough for him to have an insight, because he took a break. So he was able to make deeper connections. And I think the problem is we're constantly bombarded by everyone, everything, so many things all the time. It's hard for us to take breaks, and we need this time for contemplation. I like very much, again, going to the Greeks, because Socrates, he did that. It was really, you get a lot of people together, a bunch of people who followed him, right? And there was a claim. Somebody would say, the most important virtue is ethics. I don't know. And then he would ask a lot of questions, and people would simply contemplate things and ponder, and then they would reach a conclusion. And he would always, he was a very irritating person, apparently. He asked too many questions. That's what got him killed, by the way. But he would, why do you say that? And what about this? He would basically play devil's advocate, right? Trying to get people to give better answers and reach a more refined truth, let's say. But yeah, this is a great way for us to really get to the bottom of things and just ask questions, reflect, do nothing. Of course, we're busy, but again, we're just trying to, we're connecting with people. It's a social thing. It's a social event where you're having a conversation with people, and you're really rethinking and changing things, some of your assumptions, I think. Yeah.
I mean, that's what I mean. Education is super dynamic, and of course, we have this idea that as we enter into scenarios, we see the different interactions kind of just shape. And I was listening to someone who was speaking about lingua cultural competency and how
Nice.
yeah, it was super interesting. I have to try and get the person on the podcast, but thinking about how one, you have this, you have a language, and then you have cultures embedded in people and the language, and how all those things, it's not like two things that are side by side, it's just a mix together. And
Yes.
anyways, but this is like the idea is that we have to mix things, experience things, but then also I don't think that there's enough time for, like you said, contemplation, thinking, reflection, connecting the dots, all of those things. And so those are things that small steps. After taking one of your courses, actually, I decided at the end of all of my lessons, I'm going to give my students time. And I started this last year.
So I did
Up
have
through
an
this year.
influence on your practice.
You're a great influence on me.
Wonderful.
And
Yeah.
so at the end of lessons, one, we kind of do a wrap up. So key points, things that they thought were interesting. It's time,
Takeaways, right? Yeah.
consolidation, which is something I did previously, but I've added another component onto it where
Nice.
it's silent time. And they sit by themselves. They can ask me if they need assistance or anything, but it's just time for them to sit, reflect, and connect to, like, where can this be applied in different places.
Exactly. And that works.
I'm telling you, I've gotten just direct verbal feedback from my clients, and like, I love the new style classes. I never get to stop and reflect on things because they go from meeting to meeting or from class to class.
Yep.
They don't ever really get that time just to kind of digest the information and think about other things that might be. And they said that it's been wonderful. They've really enjoyed the experience. So
cool.
So students actually really appreciate this.
Definitely. And we've known that for millennia, and we have to take breaks, right? I feel like, so again, it's modern society, and especially in the last, I don't know, 100 years or 70 years or something like that. It's just that we've been operating, let's say, under the notion that we need to learn more and more and more and more, and maybe the IQ thing, declining has to do with that. It's just too much, and we need time to reflect and to connect things and to consolidate memory. And I wonder if the future can be very complicated, very problematic, if it operates again, if the mindset is we have to keep learning more and more all the time. But the future can be great if we look at things like meditation, or brain breaks, or even simulations nowadays. Since we're talking about the future, think about augmented and virtual reality. So we can wear goggles, and suddenly you are in Provence in France, and you're just looking at the beautiful landscape. And this would be great. Of course, we can have spaces if we're working in a physical building. So we can have certain spaces there where you can go and meditate, contemplate things, or just do nothing, just be there for a couple of minutes. But maybe I think technology can help us with that. It can help us leave our reality for a couple of minutes and just do nothing, and just appreciate this beautiful scenery that unfolds right in front of your eyes. And this is something that I believe will probably revolutionize education in a way. It's not really, people are always talking about enhancing learning and accelerating, speeding up learning. I think we have to go back to the roots of learning and slow things down a little bit. Instead of, we still have to learn the basics. We have to memorize a lot of things, but we also have to stop a little bit now and then in between sessions. Otherwise, it doesn't work. We know that. And there are things are becoming more automated nowadays. Like I was, playing with Chat GPT. That's amazing.
That's
I
crazy,
mean,
right?
it's crazy. A lot of people
Yeah.
are worried about, the repercussions, right? Oh my God, now everybody's going to cheat, right? Nobody's going to write a text anymore. But then if you look on the bright side of the technology, it saves time. There are so many things. Again, we have to integrate that somehow. It's a reality. I know I think it's kind of useless nowadays to fight against certain things, because just like Google. I remember Google was a huge problem. I remember YouTube was a huge problem. Like, oh my God, it's going to destroy education. And then it becomes a tool. It gets integrated, and hopefully that's where we're heading. Because if things can be on autopilot, more and more, maybe we should have more time for contemplation, and just resting, going into our diffuse mode, and really connecting things so that we can learn things more effectively. Otherwise, I feel like maybe we're heading towards our own destruction. Like, too much information, we don't know how to separate things, to distinguish what's reliable, what's not. And we've seen some of the consequences of that all over the world, right? Some people are paranoid about so many things. So it's very hard for us to have the chance, the opportunity to take a break and really contemplate things, right?
Yeah, it's the society has created this idea of like mass consumption. The more you consume, the more you know, and that's not necessarily true, right? Because
Exactly.
a jack of all trades is a master of none, right?
That's true, right?
So I mean that quote does go on, and there is a valid, valid we can say argument for becoming a jack of all trades, but at the same time, it's like there's a lot of people who superficially understand a lot of things superficially, but they're not able to make the connections that maybe would be beneficial. So if we're, if
Yeah.
we're going to sit there and say, well, we have all this information and unfortunately we're getting dumber. Well, we're getting dumber
Yeah.
because we're not using the information to our advantage.
That's so true, And I remember talking to someone. So I've been traveling, training teachers in different states. And, I'm reading George Orwell's 1984. It's like, I love, those dystopian novels. And one of the things that we were talking about is that a lot of people they read the synopsis, or they read, a shorter version of the original, and they feel like they can teach, they can preach about the book, right? And then you realize that there are so many details in the original book that if you don't read those things, they're not there in your cortex. I mean, because you haven't seen them, right? And then you can make assumptions based on the short version you read, right? But that's not going to be good enough. And I think this is what's happening in our profession nowadays, and other professions, is people take a course, and this is okay if you are trying to learn more. I think that's, it's totally fine. And also, if you're humble to say, hey, I don't know much about this, but this is here is what I know, and then I'm trying to get better. The problem is when people take a short course, or they read the synopsis of a book and they call themselves experts, and they start selling because society is telling them sell, sell, sell. And that's what, and again, you haven't had time, and you weren't exposed to the whole thing for you to have the connections that actually matter. And that's what makes an expert, right? So an expert has probably engaged with the material, the thing, for so many years, or in many different ways, different contexts, and with different people, that they have so many connections in their brains for this particular thing. And then, of course, like you said, nowadays people are just sort of forced to learn more and more and more about all things. Like, when we are, you and me and people who work on social media, we have to learn how to edit videos. Like, we have to
I don't edit.
We have to learn everything, right? I mean, it's
I just
fun.
do, the general basics.
So we do the basic stuff. I mean, sometimes we can do it well, but again, it gives us less time to focus on the things that we should. I mean, teaching and learning and all of that. But again, it's a demand that we have today, right? Yeah.
It reminds me of, I'll just give a quick anecdote of bringing this down to reality for people. So I had a student a few years back, and she said, well, I need to stop taking classes, but I'm going to continue to learn. I'm actually going to take a course online. And I was like, that's great. From what institution? Because though I criticize, the educational institutions, I still believe that you get very high quality courses from.
Definitely.
Okay. Anyways, and she said, "Oh no, it's on YouTube." I said, okay. What are you taking a course on YouTube? And my husband just he gets so angry about this. It was about financial investments, and specifically in like cryptocurrency and things like that.
Okay.
And it was a short course, and the overall thing was, they're going to teach you how to invest your money, your savings, into cryptocurrency
in 1 year or something like that.
Yeah, and you're going to double your return and blah blah blah, with all these promises.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, well, who's the teacher? I don't know, some guy. Okay, so no references, just some guy. Yeah. It's a free course on YouTube, and I thought to myself, if I have the secrets of doubling $10,000 into $20,000 in 2 months, then I'm not going to be revealing those secrets online. First of all,
yeah.
So
if you are, you're gonna sell it for a lot of money, maybe.
Exactly. Like let's get critical about what you're going to learn here.
Yeah.
And then I was like, well, he does it. He it's not his regular job, but he started doing it on the side, and he started making lots of money, and now he's selling a course. And so you take the free one, and then there's like an extended course. And I thought to myself, I said, how much are you going to learn about actual financial markets? Because from what I've understood, and I've taken literally maybe 3 classes in university 100 years ago about financial markets and things like that. They're so interconnected. Like, if something happens over in Indonesia, and then possibly a civil war or rebel troops over here in a different part of the universe, that all affects this currency with that currency. And I said, so it's so intricate, and you have to be so keyed in on the news and everything else.
Yeah.
And she's like, yeah, it's fine. I was like, okay, all right, go learn how to use
Well,
the app and good luck. And I
yeah,
just, I couldn't believe it. I was like, I
yeah.
would want to put my money with a specialist who actually knows what's going on.
Definitely. And now I think I should reveal a secret because this is weird. It's a
Okay, go
weird
ahead.
coincidence, you know. So for those of you listening to us, this is gonna sound very crazy, but I actually so I have I hold a BA in international relations, right? So I actually completed my studies here in Goiânia. And I published my dissertation, and it's about financial markets. And it's actually a very
I
good
knew
paper
we
that
were
I.
destined to speak with one another.
But the thing is, it was about the subprime crisis in the United States that started around 2007, 2008. There was a big
Oh, there's the
bubble.
movie about it, The
So,
Big Short. I lost my
exactly,
job
right? The
during
real
that
estate
crisis, by the
bubble,
way.
remember that? And
Yeah.
it broke, and a lot of
Oh,
people lost money,
I got laid off. My parents lost a bunch of
right?
money in their retirement. Yeah, it was a
Exactly.
whole thing.
Oh, definitely. And there are movies about that. And then how it affected the euro. Actually, my dissertation was about Germany and Greece in the eurozone. So basically, and how, because Germany had a very solid economy, the industrialized economy, and Greece, relied much more on the service sector, especially tourism. And so I actually published something about that, which is very weird to say here, but still, again, I learned that because I studied 4 years. And I'm not an expert, even if I
But
published
would you?
something.
But then, okay. So here's the
Yeah,
question. Now that you spent 4 years, you published a
yeah,
paper on it. You did the research behind it. Would you
yeah.
feel comfortable developing a course and teaching people how financial markets work?
No way.
That's what I'm saying. So
Right, exactly. But and I remember reading papers about the financial markets. I remember about the social market, Robert Gilpin. I have all the books here, but there's no way I could teach a course about that. And that's the thing. I think because we are under the impression, going back to how we learn and teaching and learning and evolution, we are under the impression that learning can be simplified to, like the essence of learning can be wrapped in a very nice package, and then you can just buy it and then you have it. But it's much more than that. It takes effort, it takes time. It's very individualized. It's something that different people will take different amounts of time to be able to consolidate different things. We know that. And the problem is that we've been selling, a lot of people have been selling courses like that because, I don't know, it's just, maybe they don't have a job, maybe they bought one of those neuromarketing courses, and how you need to create your own method, and that's the big problem, right? You don't, seriously, you have to create your own method. You don't really create your own method. Let me
I mean,
tell you
they're
that.
like,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
I read someone. Oh, I forget who I was reading. It was a paper, and
yeah,
it's a professor, a university professor, and he
yeah,
said it's hilarious because every time I have these, masters or even
yeah.
doctoral students or undergraduate students, they come to me with their proposal for their thesis, and they say, "I've got this brilliant idea," and then he
True.
reads their paper, and he's like, "You need to look at these 5 references. 10 people have already had that idea.
Yeah.
It's been done and
Oh yeah,
researched."
I remember people congratulating me on the learning cosmos, and and the owl factor, and I said, well, I'm very proud of those things, yeah, but they're not that original. It's really, the learning cosmos is just putting a bunch of things that already existed into one illustration that looks like the universe. So yeah, I think it's very
But there
nice
was
and practical.
creativity involved with that. There's something that's
Definitely, yeah,
existing, and then you took the time, I'm sure a
yeah,
lot of reflection, and you connected the dots, and you compiled something that is
yeah.
easily digestible for your public. So
I'm
there,
really glad you feel that way, Kelly,
no,
because that was the
yes.
idea, really, yeah. But
But it's
still,
not like that you created I
yes,
mean, you
I didn't create a new theory of learning like
no.
Piaget, or like Paulo Freire, or Montessori or John Dewey. So that's the
And
thing.
I think nowadays that would be really hard to do because so many things
Exactly.
have already been done.
Yes.
We're like riffing off of the giants, these great giants. We're just kind of riffing off of them and saying, okay, well, how can I,
I
do this in
stand
a
on the shoulders of giants, That's
exactly.
what Isaac Newton said. And again, we're always building upon what's been left for us, like the legacy that we inherit, right? And I think one of the things we have to understand, again, humility and understanding that we are still learning. We're lifelong learners, and we are making progress, and things are not as fixed as we used to think. I think science is making new discoveries all the time. People are studying and going back. I remember talking about the growth mindset concept, Carol Dweck, and this. It dates back to, it's older than Carol Dweck, but she was the one who kind of put it inside the package, wrapped up and sold it as the growth mindset with a lot of research. There's a lot of research involved there. The thing is, nowadays, when you try to replicate that, so when you create interventions based on this idea, growth mindset, things don't change that much. So it's not that revolutionary. And even when we're studying MBE concepts, right? So we're going, so mind brain education, there are a lot of principles and things, and then I used to think that this is amazing, revolutionary, and it is great, but a lot of things are just things that we've known for decades, for centuries, but now they're sort of, I don't know, systematized, right? Because we've been studying and testing and experimenting, and they make more sense nowadays. So I feel like whenever people say they claim that they have created a revolutionary learning method, they really don't know what they're talking about. It's just, maybe it's the whole neuromarketing thing, the marketing thing, that you need to have something that nobody else has, a differential, right? But it's not really true, folks. If somebody tells you that they've created a method that will make you learn much faster, it's probably BS. It's just, don't
No, for
trust
sure
it.
it is. It
you know
absolutely is.
Unless they published it somewhere,
Yeah.
and then you look them up on Google, and whoa, this person really knows what they're talking about, and then maybe they have created something worth checking.
But most of the things are just getting refined, and I think that's kind of, I mean, going back to how we started this, is like, so what's the future of education? So we've seen a
Yeah,
ton of stuff in the past. We're trying to collect evidence now. I think that we went through a big period of like
yeah,
collecting the evidence and getting all of the, and now we're
yeah.
trying to refine it to figure out what the future looks like.
Exactly. And I feel like a lot of things, and this is a very interesting take on what might happen. Um, in the future, we might see that many things can be done by machines, machine learning, artificial intelligence. And well, let's think of I was talking about George Orwell and Aldous Huxley. They have a very negative perspective on what's going to happen. But let's have an ideal, positive take on what might happen in the future in terms of how we learn and teach. And I feel like, perhaps technology can do a lot of things for us. It can write texts for us, it can translate things for us, and that frees our working memory a little bit, because we might have more time available to contemplate things and to reflect. And I think this would create a very interesting world in which we can actually use more, and not less, but more of our creativity to solve major global challenges, instead of, because we're stuck in a route, like we're just in a rut. We're going up and
we're, we're
down.
we're in the minutia of things instead of
Exactly.
kind of broadening it out
Yes.
and looking at, okay, so what
Exactly.
can the machines do for us, and then how can we actually use this beautiful innate organ that we have, that we
Yes.
can like start connecting
Beautiful
ideas.
brain that we have.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we have beautiful brains, and they're actually quite creative and innovative, and those are things that machine
Yep.
learning is always going to have a disadvantage of us at, because
Yep.
it's only going to be able to learn what it's trained off of.
Yeah, and it's programmed to learn, so there
Right.
are algorithms, right?
Right.
So the thing about our brains, and this is probably not going to be replicated very easily by machines and
No, I think
artificial.
that's the one thing that's holding back
I mean,
artificial intelligence is
yeah,
that one
yeah,
factor that we have because it's
yeah.
like a natural characteristic that we have that it's very very hard to replicate in terms of artificial intelligence machine
Yeah.
learning.
Yeah, so hopefully in the future we will have machines, doing a lot of mechanical, stuff for us, stuff that could be automated. That's the whole point. We don't need to do those things, and then that gives us more time to really think about creative things in art, for example, in music. So that would be a turning point, I think, for civilization, because you see what happens. And again, going back to George Orwell, Aldous Huxley, one of the things that you see, and even history, think about the Nazis and all of that. What really happens when you want to control people's creative output, when you want to make sure that you uh, overpower or you dominate people's mindsets, and you manipulate their thinking. So you get rid of arts, you get rid of, like, you control language, right? You erase history and all of that, and this is very problematic. So what would happen if we did the opposite? If the type of labor or the type of work that can be done by machines is done by machines everywhere, like never before seen scale everywhere around the world. And then we are free to do the creative stuff, lots of creative stuff, like arts, music, everything, language. What would happen? I think we would become an intergalactic civilization. Maybe we would come up with amazing solutions for uh, travel, for example, communications. Huge breakthroughs, I think, because we would have time to contemplate and really think about those things and have creative thoughts. Well, let's see. That's me being very positive about the future,
Well, we
because
have to be optimistic sometimes. We can't always be
yeah, I think
pessimistic
so.
about it.
Otherwise, if you get stuck reading those books that I'm reading, oh my God, the future is going to be horrible. you know People are going to try to control us, and again, there's lots of imposition. uh
Well,
I don't know.
perhaps we can look at it as a structure that we don't want to emulate. So something that we would
Yeah,
choose not to because we can see the destructive consequences of having those types of
yeah,
things and power and
yeah.
right.
So yeah, like, I think, like, I know we are coming
No, that's
to
fine.
an end,
Yeah.
but I think a final message or something
Mm.
that I
Yeah.
could share is that, so if you look at 1984, and even A Brave New World, or those dystopian novels, one of the things that happens is that our working memory is full because we're constantly concerned over, we're paranoid, because we know that eventually somebody's going to come at night and drag us somewhere, and torture us and kill us because we are not free to think. And when you are under that kind of pressure and oppression, you don't have a lot of cognitive space to be creative or to do anything else. So I think the future of learning has to take into consideration that if we want creative solutions, to real world problems, the major challenges we face today, we need space to think. And that means we shouldn't be oppressed. We should feel free, we shouldn't have stuff in our working memory all the time, like, when are they coming? Why should I be doing this? We simply should contemplate, nature, the universe, be with each other, interact socially, because that really leads to amazing learning outcomes. And that has worked throughout evolution. It works today. It will probably still work very well in the future. Being together with people, thinking freely, being curious, trying to understand how the world and the universe work. And I think that's the way. This is the way. That's a Mandalorian reference, by the way, because I'm a geek. Yes.
You
This is
had to sneak in a
not to bring
couple
in the
nerd
Mandalorian
references.
because that's very oppressive. But this is the way. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's a wonderful message, to start thinking about how we can use things to our advantage, especially new technology. I know that's something that you talk about in your book too, right? So
Yeah.
like kind of
Definitely.
looking at those principles and like leveraging what we have so that we can focus on things that are really important, freeing up our working memory, letting ourselves be able to, connect dots, be creative, go deeper into
Yeah.
things that are of interest, talk to people, be social about, what we know, what other people know, and how much you can actually know, show, and grow, right?
No, show and grow. That's it. And like you said, it's really about taking time to be around people, connecting, reflecting. We need more of that, not
Right.
less. I don't think, and if you're listening to us and you feel like I need to find another course because it's my CPD,
Right.
yeah, of course, sure, but also take some time off for yourself,
Right.
have
Yeah.
some me time a little bit so that you can just, I remember spending a couple of weeks at my in-laws house in the south of Brazil, right? And it's a very small town. It's Pinhalzinho, Santa Catarina, right? So I was there, and I remember I found a couple of books there. I brought some books with me,
Hmm.
so I would go to this very nice park, and there's a pond, there's a bridge, there are many trees, and I remember just reading, but basically every 5 minutes I would just put the book away and just look around,
Yeah.
and observe things and the birds. And I had a lot of ideas from that alone,
Yeah.
reading something that has absolutely nothing to do with our line of work,
Hmm.
our industry. I remember I was reading Around the World in 80 Days, Jules Verne, so which I hadn't read. I said, why haven't I read
Read
this? I
this.
want
Yeah.
to read this book. And then I would take 5 minutes off the book, basically, and then go like, this is what I have a great idea of something I can do because of the stimulus, right? And I
Right.
think we should do that more often.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The stimulus doesn't always necessarily have to be related exactly to the topic. Sometimes we get inspired by things and are, creative enough to make a connection between something completely unrelated and
exactly.
something that's useful. So
Yeah,
you can't always be, product driven. I have to consume, I have
yeah,
to produce.
yeah.
Sometimes going outside of that, you actually become more creative and you create something that's even more interesting for people because it's related to unrelated things. You're connecting things.
Exactly. And I think one of the skills we might want to promote more in the future is this kind of connection that people can make, so they can get two very different areas and put them together in very creative ways. So maybe part of your CPD should be get some meditation going there, or read a classic. So go to the classics, read a classic, go to I don't know, go to the opera, or go to a street dance festival, something that completely unrelated to the stuff that you normally do, because again, it will probably give you very creative ideas. Yeah.
I think I mean, this is kind of
Yeah.
wrapping up our ideas, but
Yep.
thank you always for coming on. We do
My
have to
pleasure.
highlight that
Yeah.
you've got, because we did talk about the Learning Cosmos. So if anybody's interested, I'll put the link in the show notes to read that because
Cool.
a nice
Yeah.
collection of ideas there. Your book, No Show Grow, it's available internationally and in Brazil.
Yep.
And
Yep.
it's
Yep.
coming out. Is it coming out in Portuguese soon?
It is. So I'm still trying to translate everything, but I'm almost there. So maybe let's say the end of February or March. And
Okay. So
yeah, yeah.
Brazilian people who are interested, like, let's look at
And
that
it's
because
going to
there's
be
a
called
nice.
O Fator Coruja. So that's which is, it sounds better in English, the owl factor, because of wow factor. But
Yeah,
anyway, yeah,
that's fine.
translation, right?
But
So
it's
that,
good. It's good to have it
yeah,
for other people. So if you know someone who wasn't able to maybe access it because they were concerned about the English. It is coming out in Portuguese.
Yeah.
And we do have to highlight that you are going to be doing the opening plenary talk for Macmillan.
Definitely.
And their Global Teachers Festival.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm very proud. Yeah.
Yes.
This is
There's a
going to
lot
be
of
like
things going on, sir.
TED Talk, I've always wanted to be a TED speaker, so TED Talk. Yeah.
You can just start it with "Welcome to my TED Talk," and that's fine.
Well, yeah. If I say that, I'm going to mention your name, Kelly. That's what Kelly told me to say.
So my friend told me to say, "Welcome to my TED Talk," and then you can just start your presentation.
Wonderful.
Done. Check. Another.
Done. Yeah. So yeah.
Another thing off the list. But always, thank you again. You're so welcome to come back to chat about anything, and people can contact you at it's EDC Rocks.
Yeah,
yep, that's the Instagram.
Or you can send me an email or my website, edcrocks.com. So, just look for ED. And by the way, people don't get what EDC Rocks is about. It's something I started many years ago, folks. It's educational development courses. That's why EDC, And again, I got stuck with it, I guess. And, I had
fine.
it.
It's your thing now. It is your thing.
It's my thing now. Yeah.
All right, sir. Well, we'll wrap up. Thank you very much. And we'll talk to everybody later.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure again, Kelly. And remember, the future of teaching and learning can be very positive, actually. We just have to perhaps have more free time, to reflect on things, right?
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Real Talk and ELT. Want to join the conversation? Head on over to Instagram at Kelly Pennington ELT and send me a message. Be sure to subscribe to my YouTube or Spotify channel to stay up to date. And of course, take care of yourself, your health, your vibe, and your tribe. Until next time.